Your first assignment for packaging design is just going to be a little typographic exercise, and this is just to get you comfortable working with typography. And so it's pretty cut and dry. What I want you to take is your first name, but I want you to render your name as if it is a brand or a logo for these 5 categories: for a laundry detergent, for an expensive fragrance, either men's or women's, a children's toy, organic farm produce, or an energy drink. And you're going to be doing this in Illustrator, and I'll show you how to set it up. I'll do a little short video for each of these categories. So in this video, we'll go over the setup and we'll talk about the laundry detergent logo, and then I'll do a short video for the other 4. So as I mentioned, you're going to be doing this in Illustrator. So go ahead and open Illustrator. All right, from Creative Cloud, you're going to create new over here. And I want you to do this 8.5 by 11 letter size. So over here, we're going to go ahead and select inches. And we'll go ahead and do, should be able to have a letter up here somewhere. There we go. Let's do it in inches. 8.5 by 11. You want to make sure you're in the landscape or horizontal orientation on here. And then you want 1 artboard or 1 page for each of these logos. So we'll go ahead and make that 5. Don't worry about bleed. You don't need that for this assignment. We'll talk more about that when we start designing templates and doing your packaging design. So once you have that set up, go ahead and hit create. And so this should be your workspace in Illustrator, where you've got 5 artboards, 1 for each logo you're going to create. And so let's, in this video, talk about your first one, which is going to be a laundry detergent. So it's okay for these to go online and get some reference on here. I don't expect you guys to fly blind. Obviously, I'm looking for you to come up with your own unique solutions. But for this one, let's say I'm just going to go to, I'm in Safari. And I just typed in detergent logos, pretty simple and explanatory. And you can see some of the more common ones here. And what I would do for this, if you're unsure how to begin, is to just choose one that you like and see if you can use that as a jumping off point. So I'm going to choose the Tide logo here. And what I'm going to do, this is a little cleaner, I think. I'm just going to drag this off into Illustrator here. And I'm just going to leave this here as reference. And like I mentioned, this is just going to be a jumping off point on here, but especially as we start working with brands on here too, kind of seeing some of the conventions that are used in here. So I've got the Tide logo. I can see it's a sans serif font. I can see it's italic. I can also see it kind of goes uphill a little bit. So I'm going to move this off to the side here, and we'll zoom in a little bit. And so I'm going to start, and again, you're doing your first name, so I'll do mine. So we'll come up here. I'm going to just make it larger up here. And like I said, I'm going to use this as a jumping off point. So let's find a sans serif font. This is just the default font in here. So let's see what I have loaded in, anything that looks like it might be fun to work with on here. Let's see. This is one called Champion, which I haven't used for a while. It's kind of similar. So here's what we're going to do. Now, when I'm designing logos, what I usually do is once I have my font chosen and everything, it's a little hard to work with these when it's still as a font in this font box. So usually what I like to do is turn it into outlines. So I've got my type selected here, and let me just fill the screen a little bit more so you get a little bit more visual on it here. So up here in the type drop down menu, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create outlines. What that's going to do is take it from being a font and then to turn it into essentially little vector shapes for each of the letters here. Now, before I click on this, you'll notice when it's still a font, I've got that baseline under the type. I've got a big bounding box around it. Watch what happens when I create outlines. You can see now I've lost the baseline. I've lost that big bounding box. Now, this is all still automatically grouped together. And so what I'm going to do is ungroup it, because once I do that, so under the Object drop-down menu, I'm going to ungroup it. And now what you can do is you can move these letters independently. So let me back that up. Command Z is the way you always go backwards here. So I'm looking at this. The type is really set close together, and I'm going to give you a little exercise too in working with type spacing here. So I'm going to just tighten all my type up here a little bit. And again, this is strictly for reference over here. You don't have to mimic it exactly. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to choose a blue. And let's see, but I'm going to choose a different blue than what they have there. Now, it's also italic, and it also goes uphill a little bit. So what I can do is come over here, and you'll find this tool under the scale tool over here. So these are kind of the default tools on here. In any of the tools up here, if you see this little triangle in the corner of the tool, that means there's other tools nested underneath it. And the one I'm looking for is this one. It's called Shear. Now, this particular font didn't have an italic version of it, but that's not a problem, because what I can do is I can use the Shear tool to italicize it. Now, if I just grab this and kind of go around, it's kind of going in every which direction. What I'm going to do is, before I start slanting this, hold the Shift key down. And when you do that, that allows me to keep it all perfectly horizontal. And I can italicize it that way. Now I can do one of two things to get that uphill on here. I can either do this and use that same Shear tool, or I can just come back here and go back to the rotation tool. And now if I rotate this, that will get that uphill motion on here as well. Now, what you can do on here is, as I mentioned, you can just use this as reference, as a jumping off point. And then if you want to get a start on this and then do your own thing on here, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take this, instead of being flat and graphic like the Tide logo, I'm going to give it a little bit of dimension. So I'm going to play around with this. I'm just going to group it again. So under the Object drop-down menu, do Group. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to do a little bit of a 3D effect on here. So I'm going to come up here under the Effect drop-down menu, come here to 3D, and now I'm going to do what's referred to as Extrude and Bevel, and I'll show you what that means. With these 3D functions, my original blue type, that's represented by this blue face on the cube. So if you move this around, you can get a little bit more of a dimension to it on here. And then what we refer to with extrusion, that's the thickness that's been added in here. And when you do this, it defaults to 50 points, but there's a little slider here. You can go and make this as thick or as thin as you want on here. That's probably way too much. Maybe I'll do a little bit more than the default on here. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now, you'll notice as I drag this around, what you're seeing is that ghost image of my original type. And that's because in Illustrator, whenever you do any of these effects, it's not completely finished until it's rendered. And so until I render this, you can still see it still has the ghost image of my original type. Now, the good thing about that is, because it hasn't been rendered, if you decide, oh, you know, I don't really like that, I maybe wish the dimension had gone in a different direction. If you have not rendered this, you can go ahead and open this window. It's called Appearance. It's in the Window drop-down menu. And what this does is it will show you everything that's going on here. It's showing me I have a group, but here it's showing me the special effect I have on here. So if I haven't rendered this, I can go ahead and click on that. It's going to take me back to this 3D extrude dialog box, and then if I want to change it up a little bit, I can still do that. And as long as I haven't rendered it, you can be good to go on here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now, once you get it how you do like it, I'm going to go ahead and render it. And the way you render things in Illustrator, come up here under the Object drop-down menu. One of these two will be highlighted, either Expand Appearance or Expand. And once you render it by doing Expand Appearance, now this is rendered. So if you look over here in Appearance anymore, I don't have that 3D option because I've committed to this 3D render in here. And now I'm just going to play around with this a little bit. I'm going to do a different face on the front here. So let's do this. I'm going to select just the front of the letters. And for that, I'm going to use the white direct selection tool. This allows you to choose parts of something. So I don't want to change the dimension on here. And then what I'm going to do is just maybe add some color in here. So let's do a couple things here. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to fill it with a gradation here. All right. And these are preset gradations here. And you can see it shows every letter orange to red or yellow to red in here for each letter. When you're working with gradations, there's actually a tool over here you can work with. So it's called the gradient tool. And if you click on that, it's going to show you the little gradation in each of these. But if you want them all to work together, you can do it this way. If you click and drag. So now I've got a uniform gradation over everything. And then I think what I'm going to do to really separate this also off the blue dimension on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline just the face of the type with white here and put a little stroke on here. All right. So this is what I used as reference over here. You can see I've kind of gone my own direction on here. So don't feel like you have to completely mimic anything. Now, if I want to do the circles back there, I can do that as well. But I just deleted that because I'm kind of off-road now and doing my own thing. So I'm going to draw a circle. And I'm using the shape tool over here. All right. You've got rectangles, ellipses. And so I used the ellipse tool. Let me cancel this. So this is the ellipse tool. But if you want to use that to draw a perfect circle, you just hold the shift key down. And I'm going to make this, let's do yellow, fill it with yellow and not a gradation here. And I want to send it behind my type. So I'm going to come up here under the Object drop-down menu, Arrange, and I'm going to send it to the back. And I'm going to do kind of that same target like they had in the Tide logo. So I can draw some additional circles, but this is a really good shortcut. I'm going to come down under Object. I'm going to come down here to Path. And I'm going to do Offset Path. What this is going to allow me to do is do a perfect circle, let's say 1 inch behind. So you can see here's my original circle. There's my next circle. It's probably a little too thick. Let's try let's do 0.5 on here. And I'm going to fill this with orange. And now I'm going to do the same thing to get a third ring in here. I'm going to go to Path. I'm going to do to Offset Path. Do the same dimension on there, and maybe I'll do red on there. So here's my take on a detergent logo on here. So again, you don't have to follow my exact directions on here. You can choose a different logo for reference. You can choose your own color scheme on here. Maybe instead of using the same yellow, orange, and red, maybe what I'll do is do something like that. So play around with it, see if you can come up with your own look, something that's really unique, but something that when I look at it, I will know that it is a detergent logo.